So Ken, you were one of the first Maps API developers out there, right? So could you tell us a bit about that?
I suppose I am. Yeah, that's true. So I started developing with the original Maps API v1 back in 2005, which actually only lasted about 6 months before v2 came out. But
why the sudden change?
Why the sudden change? Well, I think Google wanted to put some more support behind it, I believe is what happened. So, but I remember at the time when I got started with it that when you put a marker on a map, you actually had to specify the longitude before the latitude.
Okay.
In V1, and then V2 came out shortly after, and I had to change all of my code to say latitude, longitude. And it's been latitude, longitude ever since, but a few old timers may remember the days before.
There's a great example of breaking changes, right?
Breaking changes, that's right.
Now, I know also back then you worked on this, became pretty famous app at the time, the Quick Maps?
I suppose at the time. At the time I was just kind of an independent developer working out of a bedroom in Canada.
Okay.
And I launched an app I called Quick Maps, and the tagline was Doodle on Google. And what it let you do is a bit of a merger of Microsoft Paint tools, right, editing tools, and Google Maps API. And so you could draw on Google Maps and label things and save your creations and send a link to your friends or put an iframe on your website. And it turned out that this became rather popular. Nothing like this existed at the time. It reached the front page of Dig and Slashdot.
Wow.
This was in 2006.
You got Slashdotted.
I got Slashdotted, and I had been experimenting with Ruby on Rails at that time, which was also a new technology, and my server collapsed in a heap at the time on a weekend when I was away, and we had to fight to get it back up. But yes, my moment of fame.
Well, but now you're here at Google working on Maps.
I am, yes. So at the time, I guess that was 2006, I was invited to interview for an engineering role at Google, which I failed miserably.
Don't worry, I failed twice.
You failed twice, yes.
As if at first you don't succeed, right?
That's right, try again. You have second chances, I'm proof. I ended up taking a job with Lonely Planet, a travel company based in Melbourne, Australia at the time, working on digital maps for them. And in 2011, I became a Googler, and I joined the Google team as a product manager this time. So if you can't code, you become a product manager. And I joined the Google Maps team then in Sydney, and I've been there ever since, as the sandals suggest.
I like it. You're bringing a bit of Australia with you.
That's right.
So you're working on, what is it? So it's the services for maps, that type of thing?
So the Google Maps APIs generally is what I work on. So we have a whole suite of services now in the Google Maps APIs beyond the original Google Maps API was a JavaScript API, but we've since expanded to Android and iOS, as well as we have a series of HTTP web services that folks can use to develop across platforms.
Right. So like what kind of things do these services offer?
So Maps, of course, right? I guess is what we're known for. We're still called the Maps APIs, but increasingly, as we've moved into an era that is heavily driven by mobile and by connected devices that are in the world and know where they are, the maps are becoming a secondary piece to what is more primarily location information that is derived from these devices, and making decisions and building applications and deriving value from that location information. So we've had a few launches recently along these lines. One is Places API. Places API has been available as a web service for a number of years, but last year we launched a native version of Places API for Android and iOS. And Places API does a number of things, but for the mobile use case, and the primary use case is where am I now? The method is called getCurrentPlace, which would seem obvious, right? Where am I now? The device can do that, has a GPS, but the GPS returns a number, and a number doesn't mean anything to a user. And turning that number into a meaningful label for a user is actually a very difficult challenge. It requires access to a database of place names that is, not everybody has, right? And so we've built that into Places API. You can use Places API to gain access to Google's knowledge of places around the world.
And also, like when you get the lat long back from a GPS, I mean, it's not pinpoint accurate, right? And there may be multiple places near you that you could be in one of those.
That's right. So Places API uses a combination of both latitude and longitude, as well as actually sensing Wi-Fi signals in the area to be more accurate, which is why it's better to use than, say, a reverse geocoding call.
Right.
We've also launched a new API called Roads API recently as well, within the last year or so. What it does is anyone who's used I guess probably an older GPS tracking app or has developed with the GPS on a mobile device knows that if you attempt to trace a route, it bounces, right?
Yep.
It bounces all over the place because, well, it has to go to space and come back down, right?
Yeah.
This is actually fascinating technology, but on the way to space and on the way back down, there's a bit of jitter. And
Depends on the weather.
It depends on the weather, of course, right? So what our Roads API does is allows you to pass in a set of raw GPS lat longs, raw GPS trace.
Right.
And from that, we will snap it to the road network and give you a normalized path, as well as an identifier that you can use to interrogate properties of the road network as well.
Interesting.
And a newer feature launch as well within the last year, our Directions API web service has been available for quite a number of years. But what we've launched recently is something we call Predictive Travel Time. Yes, with Predictive Travel Time, what you can do is when you ask for directions between point A and point B, you can specify either time equals now or time equals sometime in the future.
Okay.
And we will give you an estimated travel time and actually routes that we have derived based on our understanding of traffic conditions either now or what they will be in the future. And so for folks who are developing applications around moving objects, and the sharing economy is popping up quite a lot of these, Uber being the classic example. This is a very useful API for doing logistics planning, for instance.
So a lot of this, like location-based intelligence, there must be some fun use cases. There must be some great stuff that people are doing with it. Can you share any of them?
Yeah, so, well, I mentioned Uber. Uber is the classic example, and there are a lot of sort of Uber-like applications that we're seeing pop up around the world. One of my favorites is called Gojek in Indonesia, and they are a similar type service, but for motorcycles. In Indonesia. So you can hail a motorcycle using Gojek in Indonesia, and they're using a number of our services to decide which motorcycle should come to you, and so you can see which motorcycle is coming.
And you hop on the back of the motorbike, you don't drive it yourself?
That's right. You hop on the back of the motorbike, and it takes you to where you need to go.
Cool.
So another interesting one, Dash Labs was our Roads API launch partner, and they're using Roads API, which snaps GPS traces to the road network to help you with smarter driving. And there's a very fascinating one in Sydney around the Directions API feature I mentioned earlier. In Sydney, when you're driving down the motorway, in a lot of cities you'll see this, there's a sign on the motorway which says time to exit 123 is 5 minutes, for instance, right? And in Sydney, this is now not derived from a sensor on the road that is tracking car movement across the road, but simply by calling our Directions API for the time and traffic between the sign and the exit.
Right now.
Right? And they just put it straight on the sign. And they've done some tests before they launched this feature and proved that actually our Directions API is as accurate as the sensors on the road.
Wow.
So, yeah, City of Sydney is very excited about this because the cost savings.
Yeah, I mean the cost of like putting
and
maintaining those sensors on a road, and now what the sign itself just calls an API.
Yeah, that's right.
Wow, that's really cool.
Yeah.
So all of this stuff is available to developers?
Yes, developers.google.com/maps.
Easy to remember?
Easy to remember. And just pick your platform that you're developing for. All of our APIs are free to try. In some cases completely free, depending on your use cases, or with what we feel are moderate charges for usage above the limits, should you need it.
Okay, sounds good. So developers.google.com/maps.
That's right.
All right, well, thanks, Ken, and thanks, everybody. If you have any questions for me or if you have any questions for Ken, just please leave them in the comments below and we'll get to them. And don't forget to subscribe to the Google Developers channel.